my first confirmation that maybe I had what it takes to be an entrepreneur was Steph picking me out of hundreds of soldiers and giving me a prize and giving me this poster. I hope it doesn't mess up your filming, but that
This is
poster,
perfect.
this poster is on my wall. It's signed by Steph and the artist who made it.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley in partnership with Leumi Tech and sponsored by Hippo Insurance, Turing, Upwest Labs, and Hillel at Stanford. This entrepreneur and investor literally did it all. Meet Elie Wurtman, managing partner at PICO Venture Partners. Elie is co-founder and partner at PICO Venture Partners, an early-stage venture capital fund headquartered in Jerusalem. His investments include Vroom, Spot.io, Gloat, ChargeAfter, and AutoLeadStar. Prior to PICO, Wurtman was a general partner at Benchmark Capital from 2006 to 2012. Prior to that, he worked for 3 years with JVP, where he led early-stage media technology and enterprise software investments.
Elie Wurtman, thank you for joining me on 20-Minute Leaders. I am so incredibly happy that you're here.
Hey, Michael. Good to meet you. It was great to discover that I worked with your sister probably a decade ago, which is pretty amazing.
Unbelievable. So you have good taste. You chose the people correctly, which I think is just a slight indication for the incredible journey that you've had. I think what can sum it up, along with the incredible impact that you've had, both in the Jerusalem ecosystem, founding the first unicorn of Jerusalem. We talked a little bit about Zionism and impact and your thoughts, but also things like PICO Kids. These initiatives that you're saying, taking some time out of the busy life to understand that, we have an opportunity to make an impact. I gained so much inspiration from that. And I'm so excited to hear about your mindset and your thinking behind impact. But just briefly before we started, you mentioned something really amazing yesterday when you watched the Vroom Super Bowl commercial. I'd love for you to repeat it because it was just so awesome.
So I'm actually sitting at the dinner table with my 15-year-old Liam, and we're listening to Spotify, and the Avicii song came on, Hey Brother. And I realized that was the soundtrack for a Super Bowl commercial I had worked on with another startup I had called Enjoy about 8 years ago. And I said to Liam, it's pretty amazing. 2 Super Bowl ads, one guy, 2 different startups. That must be a pretty serious accomplishment. I've had 2 startups with 30 seconds in the Super Bowl. So I'm going to add that to my list of things, and hopefully I impress my 15-year-old son in the process.
I'm sure that he was very, very much impressed. But along with all the other incredible things that you've done, part of them were, co-founding PICO Venture Partners, which is an incredible fund based out of Israel. But you also were the general partner at Benchmark, a world-recognized venture fund, where you also worked with my sister. And 2 really incredible things are that you are the owner of a world-winning winemaker. I have to learn more about that. But you also used to spend a day a week working from Amman, Jordan, which is also incredible. So I have to dive deep into these 2 things first.
Michael, you've done a lot of research. So the secret to my success is being ideologically driven. And I have met too many ideological passions, but one of them has always been that through technology and through innovation, Israel will build bridges to peace around the world. And whether it's connecting Israelis and Americans or Israelis and Jordanians, that this desire to use innovation, to use creativity, to create a better world, a better reality, more prosperous kind of economies is something that's always driven me. So in the late 90s, people seem to forget we were very optimistic that peace in the Middle East was upon us. And I believed, together with some partners from Saudi Arabia, of all places, that we could build the largest IT services company in the Middle East. I was one of the entrepreneurs, the chairman. We had a Jordanian CEO. We had Lebanese partners, Egyptian partners, Saudi Arabian investors. It almost sounds like a fairy tale. And to top it all off, I commuted from Jerusalem to Amman, Jordan, by car across a bridge, 90 minutes, kind of door to door, and really believed that while we were building a business and creating jobs, that also we were doing the most important thing, which was bringing people together, breaking down barriers. And this is, to me, the magic of being an entrepreneur, that we can take business ideas and business enterprise, but also achieve additional goals that we have to make the world a better place. So that's Jordan. Bat Shlomo and wine, one of my favorite passion projects. So I commuted, you said, benchmark. I went to Silicon Valley. I commuted from Israel to Palo Alto, where I believe you live part-time, actually Menlo Park, every 6 to 8 weeks. It was a very long flight, especially before the direct flight to San Francisco. So I used to spend the weekends. I'd go for 10 days. And next to Silicon Valley is Napa Valley. And a good friend of mine, Ari Earl, was making wine at the time at one of the top boutique wineries in Napa. And every weekend we would visit 10, 12 wineries. And I realized that there's a huge connection between high tech and innovation and wine, and in both cases, the desire to build long-lasting things and the amount that one has to go into tending the vines and really nurturing, great outcomes and great products. And when Ari was moving back to Israel, I had stumbled upon the place called Bat Shlomo, where Israel had started. It was the first Aliyah settlement from 1889. And I said, this is amazing. If we want to understand how Israel got to where it is today, we have to start back then in the late 19th century. And what did they do back then? They grew grapes for the Carmel winery in Zichron. And I said, Ari, let's bring the latest technology, the latest methodologies, and build a great winery in Israel, but also preserve the history, express our love for the land through our organic environmental farming practices, engage in social impact. We actually set up an educational program called Regavim for kids who are great kids. There's nothing wrong with them. They just don't like to go to school. I don't know if you've ever met anybody like that. I was like that. So they work in agriculture every morning. They do their academic studies in the afternoon. And the entire workforce of Bat Shlomo are these young high school students. We pay them a fair wage. It offsets their fees for schools, a boarding school. So it's an economically sufficient enterprise. But we also make great wine. And it is my pride and passion. And I love getting together with entrepreneurs over wine. So, Michael, before you go back to California, please come visit us in Bat Shlomo for a wine tasting, off the record, off camera. We'll just have a lot of fun.
I'm already so excited that we did this. I just love this. Thank you very much, Elie. You're starting in Jerusalem. You're creating your first company, the first unicorn that came out of Jerusalem. You're in Jerusalem now. You travel, ironically, right? Almost as if in a fairy tale movie, you're over a bridge, Jerusalem to Jordan, once a week in the late 90s, as you're working way ahead of your time, and hopefully not too far ahead. Hopefully it's soon. But tell me a little bit about Jerusalem and a little bit about where you are, because if I talk to a lot of my friends in Stanford, I would ask them, hey, where is Startup Nation? Well, it's Tel Aviv, but it's shifting a little bit, and it's not instead, and it's along with Tel Aviv, we have Jerusalem as this wonderful hub. That again, you were ahead of your time with the first unicorn. Tell me a little bit about your connection to Jerusalem and why you're passionate about being there.
So sometimes if I'm speaking to a public audience, I'll ask everybody, have you read the book Startup Nation? And all the hands go up if it's a tech tour. And then I ask everybody, do you remember the chapter on Jerusalem? And Michael, do you remember the chapter on Jerusalem?
I can't say that I do.
You know why? Because there isn't one. And it is the unwritten chapter of Jerusalem is my belief about Jerusalem. And actually the hidden secret of the success of Startup Nation starts in Jerusalem. There is something about this city, the complexity of the city, the history, the perspective of what it takes to build big things. When you look, at the old city of Jerusalem, and you can see with your own eye 3,000 years of history, and you say, hey, what is my calling? What is my layer of history that I am going to write? I think that complexity leads to creativity. That just to survive every day in the city, we have to flex our creative muscles. So kind of drive and perspective of what it takes to build big things, complexity combined with creativity, diversity, all of the different sounds that and smells that bring our hearts to life, whether it's the Jerusalem kitchen, which has become famous in Tel Aviv through all of our chefs. I think all of these things have driven Jerusalemites, people from the city, to become the leaders of the high-tech industry. And let me surprise you with some of the greatest and biggest outcomes of Israel. So everyone knows about Mobileye because it's in Jerusalem. But did you know that the CEO of Waze grew up in Jerusalem, that the CEO of CyberArk, the CEO of Mellanox, of Checkpoint, the 4 of the 7 founders of IronSource, the list goes on and on and on. I'm leaving myself off the list. But the amount of over-the-top large accomplishments that have been built by Jerusalemites, people who to this day, if you say, where are you from, even if they've lived in Tel Aviv or Stanford for 30 years, they say, Ani Yerushalmi, I am a Jerusalemite. It is something in the identity that has both depth and vision and creativity and the desire to go out and do big things. I think there's some magic in the city that just pushes us to go further. And I'm a believer in the city, and I'm a believer in the people of the city. And PICO Kids, which you asked me about, is really an expression of my desire to make sure that the next generation is getting a fantastic 21st century education with a very strong sense of identity. Who are we? Where am I from? What is my past? What is my job in the present? And how am I going to define the future? And all of this is something which I find magical about the city. And I understand, Tel Aviv is a much cooler, much more fun city to hang out in. As a matter of fact, PICO has an office in Tel Aviv. But the heartbeat of the entire high-tech, innovative ecosystem, I believe, comes back to Jerusalem. And I just invested in a company called Afugata, and I was very touched. I don't know if the entrepreneur, knew about my passion or was just symbolic. He said, Elie, I'd like to bring the investors to Jerusalem, to the Kotel. We'll make a small blessing. We'll break bread together, and we will be on our way to building something great. And this idea that, everyone loves the city, whether you're from here or not, there's something magical that just connects the whole world to the city. So I'm fortunate to live here. I'm fortunate to have grown up here, to have been one of the builders of the high-tech ecosystem here. Some very successful startups, some less successful startups. We've had failures here too. It's part of the program. But I believe that there's something here that keeps on providing specific energy to the Israeli startup ecosystem.
Incredible. And of course, I casually left out that you spent 3 years with Jerusalem Venture Partners, even before that, along with all the other incredible things. But, Elie, I have to say, I love machine learning and I love patterns. And I'm seeing an incredibly clear pattern here, which is about this idea of leaving a legacy. And, with that is an impact that creates that legacy. And we're talking about impact on a nation, on a startup nation. We're talking about impact on society, on kids, whether they're with the winery or whether it's with PICO Kids. And we're seeing an impact that we haven't even discussed it, which is the incredible impact you're making on the tech ecosystem worldwide, whether it's through the public companies, through an investor, as an entrepreneur. And so all around, just phenomenal mindset. And one thing that you told me before we started this is that it all comes down to this ideology of making an impact and being driven through that impact. Talk to me a little bit about how you go about and exercise that as well with founders that you meet, because a lot of founders are young, a lot of them, like myself, are inexperienced, and I'm excited to be an inexperienced founder sooner rather than later. And how do you translate this very mature mindset through a lot of experience to young founders as they go on, hopefully responsibly, building tools that the world is going to embrace?
So I'm very much a values-driven person, and I believe in values-based leadership. And we all have our own frameworks. For me, the framework was and is Zionism and what that means in terms of building a great society here, a values-driven society, but that you need prosperity to get there. You need to do good. And part of the ecosystem that we've built at PICO is very much putting kind of on our front door. PICO is about social impact. It's about creating a better future, and also about creating great startup outcomes and embracing entrepreneurs. I believe, I might be wrong, that entrepreneurs are drawn to us because of our values, and that there's lots of money out there and there's lots of experienced people out there, but our commitment to building a better society, to creating more jobs, creating positive companies who can leave a positive mark on the world is part of what we represent. And I think it's important. It's our ABCs. It's what's really important to us. But this idea that values come first. And I'm very fortunate. When I was a soldier in the Army, and I had no idea what entrepreneur was or what high tech was. I had the good fortune of going to an education week up north that was sponsored by one of Israel's greatest entrepreneurs that many young people may not even know his name, Stef Wertheimer. And he, until recently, was probably one of the most successful Israeli entrepreneurs ever. He's in his 80s now. His company was purchased by Warren Buffett, by Berkshire Hathaway, I think for about $8 billion, back when $8 billion meant something. And he had set up an education program for Israeli soldiers to learn about the different populations in the north of Israel, about his vision of how we could all coexist and live together, how we could build green industry, high-tech industry. But he also had a vision that it was part of the continuum of Zionism, that Zionism started with settling the land, building homes, agriculture, working the land, caring for the land. And then Israel, as everyone knows, lives in a tough neighborhood. And phase two was the ability to defend ourselves. And the green branches of this tree, which represented his ideology, were our defense establishment, were the IDF. But the fruits, he at the time, he was an industrialist. He had kind of the wheels of industry. And in this prophecy almost, he talks about the phase three of Zionism being high tech, which will lead to prosperity and peace in the Middle East. He wrote that in 1984. Wow. I don't think there was a high tech industry here in 1984. I encountered him in the early 90s. And, I have lived by his philosophy, right? I have lived that my work as a high tech entrepreneur, creating jobs, continuing in the footsteps of the pioneers, bringing economic prosperity to this land as an enabler to fundamentally create prosperity and peace in our region is something which our entire industry is taking a part of. Whether everyone is aware of it or not, I have had the good fortune of having that ideology laid out for me in 3 minutes by Stef Wertheimer. Now, you didn't ask me, but why did he lay it out for me? Because in the last day of this, half day of this education week, they ran an entrepreneurship competition. I didn't know what entrepreneurship was. I definitely didn't know what a startup was. But he had challenged all of us soldiers to come up with an idea for a product and to pitch it. And, my first confirmation that maybe I had what it takes to be an entrepreneur was Stef picking me out of hundreds of soldiers and giving me a prize and giving me this poster. I hope it doesn't mess up your filming. But that
this is
poster,
perfect.
This poster is on my wall. It's signed by Stef and the artist who made it. A very dear colleague of mine, Sasha Belanki, heard the story, which I just shared with you, and said she has to track down this poster. And she tracked down the artist a few months before he passed away, tracked down Stef, got them both to sign it and present it to me for my birthday. There's not a more meaningful birthday gift I've ever received. It's just amazing because I live by the ideals represented there.
Elie, this is more than phenomenal. I am more than inspired both by, your ideology, but the way that you came to those values. And I think that I'm looking both at the city of Jerusalem a little bit different after this conversation. I already have wheels in my mind about what's next. But just in terms of daily life and how do I interact with people and how do I think critically about the impact that I want to make, hopefully the positive impact, and having the privilege of working on meaningful things that could make an impact on a lot of other people. Elie, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm so incredibly thankful for your time. Before we leave, though, I do have to ask the most important question, the most difficult one, which is 3 words you would use to describe yourself.
20 minutes ago, you prepared me. You said this is coming, and I didn't prepare. But I
gave you 10 seconds.
Mission, drive, and a lot of heart.
Mission, drive, and a lot of heart. Elie, toda rabba. Thank you so much. I'm going to see you at the winery, and I'll see you in Jerusalem. And I'm taking you up on that offer. Thank you for everything. This is great.
Thank you, Michael. This was fantastic. Thanks you so much for doing this.